Hi guys, today we are learning how to divide with decimals. We are used to seeing a decimal in our dividend number, but what happens when we have a decimal number in our divisor? If our divisor is not a whole number, we need to rewrite the problem so that the divisor is a whole number. So we need to move the decimal point over to the right in our divisor until it is a whole number. So as you can see, our divisor in the example down below is 25 hundredths. We moved it over 2 spaces to the right to make this number a whole number 25. Because we moved our divisor decimal 2 spaces over to the right, that means we also have to move our dividend decimal 2 spaces over to the right. So that's exactly what we did right here. We took our decimal and moved it 2 spaces to the right. And now this number is 750 in our dividend. So our new problem reads 750 divided by 25. Our divisor is now a whole number, and we are ready to divide. Here is another example of a division problem where our divisor number is a decimal number. So the first step is to move the decimal over to the right in the divisor until this number is a whole number. So we moved it over 2 spaces, and now our divisor reads 345. So it is a whole number. Because we moved our divisor decimal point 2 spaces to the right, we also have to move our dividend decimal 2 spaces to the right. So that's our second step. So we moved it over 2 spaces. And now the decimal point is right between the 1 and the 5. So our last step before we can start solving is to go ahead and bring that decimal point straight up in our answer. So that's step number 3. And then we would divide like normal. Here we see an example problem written horizontally. 30 and 25 hundredths divided by 5 and 5/10. When the equation was written in long division format, notice how the first number is inside the house. It is our dividend. And the second number is our divisor. The first number is what we have, and the second number is what we are dividing it by. The next step is to make note of where our decimal points are located in our divisor and our dividend. Remember that if you don't see a decimal point in a number, it is always hiding behind the number on the right. Now that we know where the decimal points are located, we need to move both decimals to the right until the divisor is a whole number. Remember, the decimal in both the divisor and the dividend must be moved an equal number of places. So we move the decimal point over 1 space to the right to make our divisor a whole number. So we also have to move our decimal point 1 space to the right in our dividend. And then we will bring our decimal point straight up in our answer or our quotient before we start dividing. The last step is to divide. Now that our divisor is a whole number and we've moved our decimal point up into our answer, we're ready to divide. When we divide 302 and 5/10 divided by 55, we get an answer of 5 and 5/10. Let's try some guided practice problems together. In my first example, I see that my division problem is written horizontally. So I need to rewrite the problem into long division form. The first number, 2 and 574 thousandths, will be my dividend inside the house. My second number, 1 and 1/10, will be my divisor outside the house. I notice that my divisor is not a whole number, so I need to move my decimal point over to the right until it is a whole number. If I move it one space over to the right, that would make this number 11. Because I moved my decimal point one space over to the right in my divisor, I also have to move my decimal point one space over to the right in my dividend. Then I'm going to bring my decimal point straight up in my answer, and now I'm ready to divide. 11 cannot go into 2, so we'll put a 0 above the 2, but it can go into 25 2 times. 11 times 2 is 22. When we subtract 25 minus 22, we have 3 left over. We'll bring down the 7. 11 can go into 37 3 times. 11 times 3 is 33. When we subtract 37 minus 33, we have 4 left over. We'll bring down our 4. 11 can go into 44 4 times. 11 times 4 is 44 exactly. We get a remainder of 0 and we have no more numbers to bring down. So our answer is 2 and 34 hundredths. In our next problem, I'm going to write that first number inside the house as my dividend. 0 and 5 hundredths. And the second number I'm going to write outside the house as my divisor. 0 and 8 thousandths. I need to move my decimal point over 3 times to the right in order to make my divisor a whole number, 8. Because I moved it 3 spaces over to the right in my divisor, I also need to move my decimal point 3 spaces to the right in my dividend. And then bring that decimal point straight up in my answer. Inside this space right here, I'm going to write a 0. So now we're dividing 50 divided by 8. So 8 cannot go into 5, so we'll put a 0 above. 8 can go into 50 6 times. 6 times 8 is 48. When we subtract 50 minus 48, we get a remainder of 2. I've already written a decimal point in my dividend, so all I need to do is add a 0 and bring it down. 8 can go into 20 2 times. 8 times 2 is 16. When we subtract 20 minus 16, we get a remainder of 4. Again, I have a remainder, so I need to add another 0 in my dividend and bring it down. 8 can go into 40 5 times. 8 times 5 is 40 exactly. So we have a remainder of 0. And our answer is 6 25/100. This time we see 95 divided by 4/10. I'm going to write the 95 as my dividend and the 4/10 as my divisor. I need to move the decimal point over one space to the right in my divisor to make it a whole number 4. So I also need to move my decimal point one space to the right in my dividend. I don't see a decimal point already, so it's hiding behind the number on the right. We can go ahead and write it in, and then we need to move it over one space to the right. So then we'll bring that up in our answer, and inside of this space, we're going to write a 0. So now our problem reads 950 divided by 4. 4 can go into 9 2 times. 4 times 2 is 8. We subtract 9 minus 8, we get 1, and we'll bring down the 5. 4 can go into 15 3 times. 4 times 3 is 12. When we subtract 15 minus 12, we get 3 left over. We'll bring down that 0. 4 can go into 30 7 times. 4 times 7 is 28. When we subtract our two numbers, we get 2 left over. I still have a remainder, so I need to add a 0 in my dividend and bring it down. 4 can go into 20 5 times exactly. So we're left with a remainder of 0, and our answer is 237 5/10. Our next division problem reads 4 7/10 divided by 1 2/10. I'm going to place my first number as my dividend and the second number as my divisor. I need to move the decimal point one space over to the right to make my divisor a whole number 12. So I'm also going to move that decimal point one space over to the right in my dividend and bring my decimal point up in my answer. So now we're ready to start solving. 12 cannot go into 4, so we'll put a 0 in our quotient. But 12 can go into 47 3 times. 12 times 3 is 36. When we subtract 47 minus 36, we get 11. I have a remainder, so I need to add a 0 to my dividend and bring it down. 12 can go into 110 9 times. 12 times 9 is 108. When we subtract 110 minus 108, we get a remainder of 2. I still have a remainder, so I need to add another 0 to my dividend and bring it down. 12 can go into 20 one time. 1 times 12 is 12. We subtract our two numbers and we get a remainder of 8. We need to add another 0 and bring it down. 12 can go into 80 6 times. 12 times 6 is 72. When we subtract these two numbers, we get a remainder of 8. So we could bring another 0 from our dividend down. And notice how there's going to be a pattern happening. 12 can go into 80, we already know 6 times, and we would get a remainder of 8. So this 6 is going to be repeating over and over. So instead of continuing on in our division problem, we can just put a line above the 6 to show that it would be repeating. So our answer is 3 and 916 thousandths repeating. We're going to set up our next division problem. I'm going to write that first number in my dividend and the second number in my divisor. 8/10, I need to move the decimal point one space over to the right to make it 8, a whole number. And then I don't see my decimal point in my dividend, so I'm going to put it at the end on the right and move it one space over. I'll bring that decimal point up in my answer and fill in that blank space with a 0. And now we're ready to divide. 8 cannot go into 5, but it can go into 50 6 times. 6 times 8 is 48. When we divide, we get 2 as a remainder, and we'll bring down the 0. 8 can go into 20 2 times. 8 times 2 is 16. When we subtract, we get 4 left over. We need to add a 0 to our dividend and bring it down. 8 can go into 40 5 times exactly. 8 times 5 is 40, and we get a remainder of 0. So our answer is 62 and 5/10. Our last guided practice problem, I'm going to put my first number in my dividend, 13 and 23 hundredths, and my second number as my divisor, 2 and 1/10. And then I need to make my divisor a whole number, so I'll move it over one space to the right, that decimal point. And then I'm also going to move the decimal point in my dividend one space over to the right and bring it up in my answer. So 21 cannot go into 1. It also cannot go into 13, but it can go into 132 6 times. When we divide 21 times 6, we get 126. We subtract these two numbers, we'd have 6 left over. We'll bring down the 3. 21 can go into 63 3 times exactly. So we get a remainder of 0, and our answer is 6 and 3/10. Now you will complete an independent practice pizzazz puzzle on your own. Remember to read the instructions carefully to figure out the answer to the riddle.